Welcome to Podomation, where we talk about all things automation and industrial cybersecurity. Podomation is brought to you by ISA, the International Society of Automation.
Welcome to the next episode of Podomation. I'm Morgan Foor, and I'll be your host today. June 23rd marked International Women in Engineering Day. To celebrate that day and to cap off the month of June, we wanted to further the discussion on women in engineering and talk about how women are empowering engineering and how they are working through the leadership in innovation. To do that, we've invited several leading ladies in the engineering field to join us and represent ISA in the discussion. Ladies, thank you for joining us and going through to talk about this topic. We think it's very important, and we are very appreciative for your work in doing this. To get started, let's introduce ourselves. Lauren, would you like to get started?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Neal. I am a project manager in major projects working for BP, and I'm also the founder and chief program creator for Valued at Work. I've worked in the energy sector for 20 years and have a best-selling book called Valued at Work that is a finalist in the Business Book Awards.
I'm Colleen Goldsborough. I am the industry sales manager at United Electric Supply. We're headquartered in Newcastle, Delaware. I was previously a sales engineer. I also am part of the ISA Executive Board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Samford. I'm the Chief Security Officer for U.S. National Security Agreements and the U.S. Federal Business for Schneider Electric. I'm also a fellow board member on the ISA Executive Board with Colleen as well.
Hi, my name is Lauren Goodwin. I am the CEO of Mission Ops. Our company does digital engineering and cybersecurity in high hazard environments, such as oil and gas and space systems. I'm also a professor at Columbia University. I teach cybersecurity and AI.
Wow, that's fantastic, Lauren. We love your book as well. Guys, let's go ahead and start on some basic questions here. Colleen, I'd like to ask you first. Can you share your journey into engineering and what inspired you to pursue this field?
Yeah, so this is interesting. I actually came from a family of engineers. My dad was a civil. My oldest ended up being a chemical engineer, and my middle a mechanical engineer. I was very against being an engineer when I was going into college. It was like, I was like, everyone else is doing it. I don't want to do it. But when I explained that I wanted to, improve upon things, and I really liked the electrical and computer aspect of it, I realized that I ended up really wanting to do engineering anyways. So even though I tried to do something different, we always joke that all of us, since we did a different type of engineering, we could rule the world someday. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that is a common discussion amongst young girls too. How can we rule the world as women, right? Megan, can you talk about your journey?
Yeah.
Sure. I'm not an engineer through my education. In fact, I have a master's in public administration, which is basically like having a master's in government. But I did also did a degree in Homeland Security. And so when I started my degree in Homeland Security, that really segued into critical infrastructure protection, which deals a lot with trying to engineer out disasters and man-made catastrophes that can happen with bridges, with roads, with power plants. And so it was really oriented more on systems design engineering from a physical standpoint. But that gave me the experience to eventually segue into cyber threats. And again, we apply common mitigation strategies through 62443, cyber-informed engineering, and others. So I still personally cannot identify as an engineer, but I would say that I have led teams and tried to create an environment that fostered innovation so that the real engineers could do their jobs effectively. But It's an honor to be among them, but I always feel like somewhat of an imposter in that I myself do not have an engineering degree, but I'm engineering adjacent, I would say.
I would also argue that you don't have to have an engineering degree to lead the way for innovation. And I think you are definitely doing that in your current role for sure. Lauren, would you like to talk about your journey?
Sure. I entered into college. I was a first generation college student, so I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just so grateful to have an opportunity to go to university, and so it was an open door for the world to explore, and I was open to anything, and that led to an opportunity for a fellowship at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. And from then on, I was hooked. I grew a passion for space exploration with that first introduction into NASA. And then my first official job was actually as a systems engineer, managing the high pressure oxygen and nitrogen systems on the International Space Station. I really enjoyed the technical aspects, but more importantly, how we could see everything integrated, not just from the systems perspective, but also the people. We largely focused on human spaceflight at Johnson Space Center and on the International Space Station. So I really appreciated and valued that while we were focusing on engineering, there's always the human element of what we do. And so from then on, I've spent my career at the intersection of technology, innovation, and most importantly, people.
Wow, that's fantastic experience as well. It's so great to have the three of you talking about different angles of this topic in general. That's so great. Thank you for adding that bit about the human piece of it as well. So let's move on to our next question. Colleen, can you highlight some of your proudest accomplishments or projects in your engineering career?
Yeah, so I work for a distributor, and as I said, I'm the industry sales manager now, but I just got promoted to that earlier this year. So previously, I was a sales engineer, and there was a water wastewater job I was a part of, and it actually started before I was on the project, but by the time this job came back around, everyone who was involved either had retired or moved on to a different position. So me and the new application engineer of my supplier, who was also a female engineer, we worked closely on the bill of material together. And it finally went out to bid, and it took over 5 to 6 years to land the job. And it finally shipped last year. So that was one that it was just nice to be on the forefront, working with the end user directly, and then actually working with my integrators to close the job.
Right. That's really cool too. We've talked about SBOMs in so many of our conferences, and it's just great to hear stories where those things surface back in too. So thank you for sharing that. Lauren Neal, we haven't heard from you yet today. What advice do you have for other women who are considering a career in engineering?
I guess the first thing I would say is don't discount yourself. Just because there's not a lot of women who are engineers doesn't mean that you can't be one. I don't think I knew anybody who was going to do engineering when I was at school. So I went to study, and I was one of very few women in the class. I think when I graduated, out of our class of 12, there were only 2. And that wasn't in the 80s or 90s or anything. That was 2006. So yeah, definitely don't discount yourself. The other thing is engineers can have a wide range of backgrounds, as we're already seeing on the call today. So, why not you? I would say seek out other women engineers. LinkedIn is a fantastic place for that. Just, type in engineer, see who comes up, look at their profiles, connect with them. So much about working life is all about networking and who you know and getting advice from them, just like this session that we have today. And the final bit I would say is about internships and work experience. It can never be overstated. Making connections with these people, getting experiences in their workplaces, it will open up your world to so many things that you've never considered. I guarantee that.
Absolutely. That's very sound advice. And I think Lauren Goodwin would agree with you. Lauren, how do you promote diversity and inclusion within your workplace or the engineering community?
That's a great question. I'll frame it a little bit differently. I think that one of the key outputs of DE&I initiatives is belonging. And belonging inspires an emotion in us. Do we feel like we belong? Megan mentioned imposter syndrome, or feeling like it's like she doesn't belong. So how can we promote that feeling of belonging, I think, is the biggest goal in DE&I initiatives. So in our organization and where I teach, I always try to promote that feeling of belonging and inclusion, not just with a seat at the table, but an active voice in decision making, and applying their thinking, their ideas, their suggestions into all of our work in the classroom. When I teach, I always open the class, every class, with "How are you feeling?" Imagine, teaching a group of technologists, and I open the floor with "How are you feeling?" Most of them think I'm crazy, but I actually care. I actually want them to feel that they matter, how they feel. There's also in some of my courses a very low ratio of women, and I want them to know that I care. And so I place that out there on "How are you feeling?" because I want to inspire that feeling of belonging and genuine care, that you matter, and I value who you are and what your voice is and what you have to bring to the table, and not just the physical presence, but your ideas and your suggestions.
Oh, that's great advice as well. Something someone once told me was that if you start a meeting by giving every member of your team a compliment, could be about anything, then it starts the discussion off on a positive note versus everyone stressing out about everything that's going on around them. So that's something that I've often thought about as well. So I'm really happy that you brought that up. It's very much in sync with some of our tactics. So Megan, Samford, can you share a memorable experience or mentorship moment that has impacted your career?
I can. So I thought long and hard over this question this morning when I was getting ready, and there were lots of examples that I could have brought up that fall along the lines of traditional mentorship. Having executive presence, leading teams, leading goals by objectives. But really, what it came down to, my most heartfelt experience, is there was another female executive in cybersecurity at a company that I worked at, and I really admired her. She had wonderful executive presence. She had great command about her presence. She was so professional. She was so classy. She was always on point. And I was walking up to her office one day for a meeting, and she was actually still on another meeting, but the door was cracked, so I could definitely hear part of the conversation. And I knew that she was talking with another very high up executive in the company, and I heard her say, "I messed up." She actually said another word that I won't repeat on this podcast, but she just came out and she said it. And in that moment, my respect for her transformed into something very different. I actually felt a real connection with her in this moment of vulnerability that she shared, and that she was confident and she knew herself enough to admit that something had gone terribly wrong, but she was absolutely willing to own it, and she owned it in a very direct way. And so that one moment in my career has meant a lot to me, because often I think it's very important for leaders to publicly admit their mistakes in front of their teams, because to some of the points Lauren was making earlier, it creates an environment where people feel that they are still valued enough to be wrong. They can be wrong and they can still be great at their jobs. And so that one moment, I can't tell you why it was so defining in my career, but it was very powerful. And so I just wanted to share that, because that was the one that kept coming to the top of the list. No matter how many other great examples I tried to come up with, that's honestly it.
Sure. I think that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that story. Lauren Neal, do you have a memorable experience or mentorship moment that you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I started off life doing software, applications engineering, and very quickly I realized that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I started over after working for 3 years for a subsea engineering company, and I knew nothing about subsea engineering, and I was in the subsea equipment group. And for the first few months, I was the person who was, Lauren, can you incorporate this person's comments into this document? And so I was just doing that type of work. And then my manager, a guy called Joe, and he was in his mid-60s at the time, he just came over to me one day and he put this procedure on my desk and said, you need to go to site and go and witness this qualification test of this cable. And I went, okay, because he said we didn't have any inspectors. And it was for a renewable project. So I took the procedure, I went on site, witnessed the test. It was full PPE and everything like that. I came back and I reported on it. And then next time there was a test, it was Lauren, you go. And I was back and forth to this site for about 6 months. So I saw everything from qualification testing, the layup, the rework that was needed, the testing. They even let me do some of the testing. And eventually I went offshore with it to install it. So that was my first offshore experience. And all of it I put down to, because I come back to this story quite often, it was all because of Joe. Joe took a chance on me. He acted like a true, he was mentoring me the whole time, but he acted like a true sponsor, a true advocate. Because I was just some kid that didn't know anything. But if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have been able to build up my experience going onto site, build up my confidence on site, going offshore. And then that really changed my career trajectory, because then it was like, oh, Lauren does power cables and umbilicals. She can do this job. And there were no questions asked. So I owe so much to Joe. And I always think of him when I'm thinking about career defining moments.
No, that's a really great story, Lauren. Let's move on a little bit more to talk about some emerging trends. Colleen, what are some emerging trends or innovations in engineering that excite you?
Yeah, so one that is really exciting me right now is augmented reality and how it's going to be used in the workforce. And my company is investing heavily in this technology. And I believe it's going to be a way of the future of training and implementing safety measures. And so it's just, everyone's a little hesitant right now. Everyone's intrigued about it. So I'm interested to see how all the end users are going to actually implement it at their company.
Yeah, now you're on a topic after my own heart. We just wrapped our operational technology cybersecurity summit in London, and we actually offered a cybersecurity escape room that was with VR headsets, and it was a training module teaching incident response. And we absolutely are in agreement that that is where a training module is headed. It's a great way to coach folks on what to do and put them in a scenario situation that is a little less stressful so they can learn, but also fun so that they feel like they're moving at the pace needed to keep up. So yeah, I am very much on board with that. We thought that was very successful in London. So, if you guys are interested in looking at that, we absolutely have a model that follows suit. So let's talk about encouraging more people. You guys gave some very inspiring stories. It's hard to sit in a room with so many people, even in a virtual format, that have such wonderful careers at a young age and are female for engineering. That is really inspiring for a group of women. So how can we encourage more women and girls to pursue STEM education and careers in engineering? Megan, do you want to take this one?
Sure. I see myself in this question because when I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to work in national security, but I never would have thought that a few years later I would be working in a role that was somewhat engineering adjacent. And still, I've been quite honest that I'll be the first person to say that I'm not an engineer, but I have worked with wonderful engineers, and I've helped manage teams of security engineers. Really, I think for the first time in history, we're seeing more women attend college than men. So it was some study, don't quote me, but I'm sure the data is out there that shows that women have a slight lead above men when in terms of going to college to get that first 4-year degree. My friends and a lot of people that I grew up with, and maybe I don't have full visibility into this, maybe you all are seeing different things, but I still see tons of women saying my highest pursuit is to be a lawyer or to be a doctor or be a teacher or be a nurse. And these are fields that traditionally women have gotten into and stayed in and had long and prosperous careers in. For whatever reason, we're not seeing them have the same interest in engineering. And I believe that the only way to make someone do something is to make them want to do it. And so I think that we have to look at incentives that would pull someone that obviously has the aptitude, has the mathematical interest, has the science interest, someone that could be going into the field of medicine as a female. Is there a reason why they might not also consider a degree in engineering? And what would incentivize that? In many cases in cyber, quite frankly, I think that there's a huge financial incentive. I think for women, if they were aware of the salaries that being in engineering or being in engineering management or maybe even cybersecurity, the salaries that these roles can command, I think would definitely be enticing. But I think that this knowledge has to be more widely shared because women want more financial independence. They want more control over their careers. And I think that we have to figure out a way for engineering to be shown in the same honor, in the same light, and in the same lucrative value that medicine or having a law degree is. But somehow we're missing that.
Absolutely. Lauren, you spoke a lot earlier, Lauren Goodwin, about the importance of mentorship. Can you talk about how this is in relation to what Megan's talking about? Can you discuss the importance of mentorship and the support networks for women in engineering and how that might help inspire folks?
Absolutely. I want to pull a little bit more on the last question, and I promise there will be a bridge over into answering that question. I think in terms of being able to allow women to get into STEM fields, it starts with education. There's a myth that we are auditory learners or we're visual learners and just one thing. And based on the way that the brain is biologically designed to learn, it's actually through everything that Lauren Neal just explained through experience. And so I think that it really calls for a change in our education system because often early on, because someone doesn't pass a standardized test or they're sitting listening to a teacher or a professor just talking at them, I think that we need to invite more experience and into the way that we learn through in the classroom and in a higher education or K through 12 setting, but also in the workforce. And I think that that will invite more representation of women in STEM fields because our brains learn through experience. We have to invite all types of learning, and that stimulates, the auditory aspects, the visual aspects, and like I mentioned earlier, the emotional aspects of feeling like you belong and that you can really dive into learning engineering. And I think that that's best. I won't, Lauren Neal did a wonderful job explaining what that meant to her. And then in terms of how mentorship matters, certainly mentorship and finding those people in those experiences that you look up to or you admire, like Megan highlighted. I think it's also being an advocate. I think that advocacy is one of the most important things that we can do for women to enter and stay in engineering fields and STEM fields. And that can be through calling out if something's wrong or calling out if it was actually a woman who came up with the idea or the solution. I have something in my company. I say, if you did the work, you're going to present the work. It's not the person at the top always that gets to do the presenting. So that's a form of advocacy that I think is most important as a cornerstone of mentorship. And so we don't necessarily have to have the label of mentor to be an advocate for each other and those around us. And I want to comment on ISA to close out. It was someone in ISA actually that said to me, have you ever considered being a CEO? And I looked at her and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why would you ask me that question? So I've always have a special place in my heart for ISA because of their advocacy. I don't know what it is about needing validation or permission to go into a certain role, but it was because of Andrea that I actually listened to her because of her advocacy and launched my own company, and we're going very, very well. So I just wanted to call it ISA for creating advocacy and living those values and principles for women.
Thank you for that. We've got one more question. Lauren, this one's for you. Can you tell me, what do you envision for the future of women in engineering, and what steps do you feel are necessary for us to get there?
I would love to see a world where if you were asked to name 5 engineers, that there are, okay, maybe I should say 10. If you were 10 engineers, you would have equal numbers of men and women there. I mean, if someone asked me, go and name a famous female engineer, I'd pause. But if I were to ask a male engineer, I could probably name them. So that would be the first one, people would just know these women's names. The second one is that we wouldn't actually be talking about women in engineering, because it would just be engineering. And every child, every teenager, every young adult, even at any stage of your career, really, there you could say, you know what, I could be an engineer. That's something that is open to me, providing that is something that you're interested in and you've got those skill sets for it. Your demographic should absolutely not be a hindrance. I would say for anything, but specifically engineering, because engineers really do change the world. And I think everybody's got that light in them that they can be a change maker. So that's the world that I'm striving towards. And I mean, we've had so many good examples already of steps that individuals and companies can make to make that happen. The final thing I would say is all confidence, kind of from everybody. Confidence in yourselves if engineering is somewhere you want to go into, even if there's no one that looks like you, be the trailblazer. But also for companies, be confident in the skill sets of the people that you are employing. You're not bringing them in to just tick a box and just take a seat and keep it warm. You're paying them to actually bring value to your business. So why not open the doors for them and give them every opportunity to just absolutely soar and knock things out of the park? Because it's a win-win for everybody, especially the world.
Okay, well, what an inspiring discussion. Thank you guys so much. This has been really fabulous to connect everyone and for us to be able to talk about how women are empowering this field. I think it's great. And Lauren, Neil, to go further into your point, I really feel like that is an area that we can go to soon, because more and more women are getting interested in these types of discussions. I think it's just more point of directing people the right way. So the conversations that Andrea was having with Lauren Goodwin, and the conversations that we're having in our universities, in our K through 12 systems, making sure that we are talking about anyone can do anything, because that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish here, and just getting people to really feel that for themselves and have the passion about it. Because I firmly feel that people with passion can do anything. And that stems across all levels. So thank you guys for being a part of the discussion about women empowering engineering. And thank you for everything you do in your role to get us to those next steps. And that's all we have for Podomation today. We'll see you next time.
This has been Podomation, brought to you by the International Society of Automation. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people to find our content. Podomation is produced by me, Liz Neiman, and Morgan Foor at ISA. Our music is by Mixer Drummer and has been licensed from Pond 5.